Maybe that's why it's not working, because it's not 7. Okay, it's 7 now. Check, check, check. Check, check.
Testing, testing. go through my. So when you talk, right,
Mm-hmm.
to him, um, whenever you're not.
So, all right, 4 minutes. Yeah. Oh, okay. So hello everybody that's watching. Thank you for coming out tonight. I just want to let you all know we are going to start right at 7:10. So go grab some water, grab a snack, do whatever you need to do. We'll see you back at 7:10. You can. Yeah. 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 Wait, you said to center this camera? Oh, okay, okay, never mind. Um, would I mean Jalen, Kyle, Darlene, do y'all want to say something as presidents just before we get started? Like, you know. Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, everybody in this room. He's not muted. He's also not talking.
Yeah. Um. Okay, my headphones aren't working. Hold on. Come on, y'all. It's not the time. Mm. All right. All right,
All right.
all right,
All
everyone.
right,
Good
everyone.
evening.
Good
My
evening.
name is Jack
My
Williams
name is
III.
Jack
I will
Williams
serve as
III. I
your
will
host
serve as
tonight
your host
for
tonight for
Voteless People is a
Voteless
Hopeless
People is a
People.
Hopeless People.
The Brothers of
The
Alphi Alpha
Brothers of
Fraternity
Alphi Alpha
Incorporated
Fraternity
Epsilon
Incorporated
Chapter,
Epsilon Chapter, as well as the NAACP
chapter here at the
chapter
University of
here at the
Michigan, would like
University
to
of
thank
Michigan
you
would
all
like
for
to
coming
thank
out
you all for
tonight.
coming out
We
tonight.
appreciate
We
it.
appreciate it. We all know that this is a very
subject.
important subject.
Our elections coming up
Our
pretty
election's
soon, and
coming
we're
up
getting
pretty
people
soon, and we're
educated
getting
about
people
voting,
educated about
voters'
voting,
rights, what they should
voters'
know.
rights, what they
For a lot of college students, myself included, this is our first presidential election, so we want to make sure that we are as informed as possible. Our guest tonight is Senator Jeff Irwin, and he has some things that he would like to share with us. So without further ado, I'm going to let him have the floor.
I'm excited to be here, to talk about voting, voting, voting. I love voting. It's one of the reasons why I've devoted my life to public service. My name is Jeff Irwin. I'm the state senator for the 18th district here in Washtenaw County. So, all of you folks who are watching, unless you vote back home, you're my direct report. And so I would encourage you to, let me know what you think I should be doing in the state government to make Michigan a better place. But I'm not on the ballot this year, and so it's a really interesting election to be able to come to you just 20 days before when the polls are going to be closing, to talk to you about how important it is this year that we get out and vote, and just to talk to you about some of the issues that are relevant at the state, at the national level, and at the local level. And so, I'm always excited to be a part of these kinds of conversations, because these are the moments, 20 days from now and the days leading up to that, when early voting is available. These are the moments where we have an opportunity to actually change the course of history in a very specific way. I mean, there's just like this moment where things change in a palpable and noticeable way, right in the wake of that. And there's a lot of different ways for us to exert influence on our communities to try to make a positive difference. But voting is one of those things that just really has a palpable, obvious outcome. And there's something that I appreciate about that. There's something exciting about that to me. So I'm going to try to talk about, sort of like what I think is at stake and some of the different things that excite me about this particular election, and then try to leave some time for questions. Usually that's the most interesting conversation, is when we get into questions. So hopefully you folks will have some of those for me. First off, I mentioned I'm a state senator. I'm a Democrat. I'm a proud Democrat. One of the reasons why I'm a Democrat is because I feel like the Democratic Party has, not always, but always, generally done a much better job of standing up for the little guy, standing up for folks who are in need, trying to rebalance the scales of justice. And, that's really what we need government for. We need government to make sure that the system is fair. And when there are people who are putting their finger on the scale because they have a lot of resources or they have a lot of power of some sort, and they're preventing others from having access to, the franchise, access to the vote, access to economic opportunity, that's where we need government to come in and correct that and to balance those scales. So that's why I'm a Democrat. And so you're not going to be shocked to hear about some of the issues I focus on tonight, and you're not going to be shocked to hear me say that I'm encouraging everybody to vote for Joe Biden. This election is important. He always talks about how he's fighting for the soul of America. I think we absolutely have to restore honor, integrity, and truth to the White House. I mean, look, all politicians come out here and exaggerate about this or that, and there's a lot of commentary about he's lying, she's lying, but what we've got going on for the last 4 years with Donald Trump has just been a fiasco of lies. It's one of the things that really is hard for me to accept as a public official, because you want to go out there and do the right thing. You want public service to be a something that people appreciate, but Donald Trump just really punctuates all the negative feelings people have about politics, punctuates all the negative feelings people have about the truthfulness of people who are in public service. And that's something to me that's just fundamental and sort of rests on top of everything else. But I come to this as somebody who, I was a Bernie voter. I spoke at the Bernie rally in April. Biden is not somebody who, has a political history that makes me super excited. And so, I really have to talk to you about what I am excited about with the Biden presidency. It's not just beating Donald Trump. It's also, the future of Joe Biden and what he has on his platform, along with Kamala Harris, for this run. And there are some exciting things in there. He has been a candidate that has changed a lot from when he first ran in 1988, when I was a little kid, till now, and so much so that he's got as a top element of his campaign some of the things that draw me to public service. Things like $15 minimum wage, and the idea that the economy should work such that when people go in and put in a full week of work, they can put a roof over their head, they can have food on their table, and that's not the 725 doesn't do that. And so, I'm glad that he's out there in an aggressive way on that. I'm glad that he's out there in an aggressive way on what he's calling making college almost free. And what he means by that is a plan to make college tuition free to all people who are coming from families with less than $125,000 in annual income. And basically saying that you're going to go to school tuition free if you attend a public school or if you attend a historically black college or university. Either of those, you're going to get your tuition paid as long as you come from a family where you don't have an income in excess of $125,000. Once again, standing up for the folks who need that hand up, who need that ladder of opportunity to better their lives, but in ways that also contribute to the bettering of our whole society, right? And it's something that helps our whole economy when more people are getting a higher education, more people are developing the skills to be successful. He also has a plan to eliminate student debt for those same families. He also has a really aggressive plan on housing. A couple elements of that are that he's talking about building 1.5 million new homes and public housing units. But another piece that maybe even is more exciting to like individuals is he's talking about a $15,000 refundable tax credit for first-time homebuyers. Now, there's a lot of young people today who are, wondering with student debt and with the way the economy is now and with all the uncertainty, can I buy a home? Well, a $15,000 bump is certainly a good way to get a lot of young folks who are just coming out of college or maybe 5 or 10 years out of college and haven't had an opportunity to buy a home yet, get them into that economic opportunity, get them into that investment that can help them add to their economic well-being long term rather than their landlords. Excuse me, getting their drink. He also has a lot of other great things to say about boosting K-12 spending at the federal level, particularly for low-income communities and special education. Those are huge needs that we face here in Michigan in a big way. So there's a lot of things to be excited about with Joe Biden's candidacy. And, it doesn't take, I think, many people a whole lot to be motivated when you've got someone like Donald Trump in the White House. But I wanted to focus on some of the positives and talk about how voting for Joe Biden could actually contribute to a better future for all of us. I want to talk a little bit as well about Senator Gary Peters. I've known Gary Peters for a long time. My first job in politics was as an intern to former Senator Alma Wheeler Smith from our area. That's when I first met Gary Peters when he was in the state Senate. And he was a big leader on the environment then, and he still is now. That's an issue that's near and dear to my heart, the protection of the Great Lakes, clean air and clean water. Those are huge issues for me, and he's been a big leader on that. And, possibly even more important than any one issue, though, is that what's at stake is the control of the Michigan Senate. And what's at stake is the control of the U.S. Senate. And we've seen over the last 4 years what a difference it makes with Mitch McConnell running the U.S. Senate. We need to re-elect Gary Peters because we need to put those gavels in this U.S. Senate in the hands of Democrats, so that instead of hearing about in committee proposals to build walls and other nonsense, we can talk about a positive solution to immigration instead of that nonsense. Instead of talking about what we're talking about now, we can talk about advancing our housing policy or investing more in education. We can get back to having committee meetings in Congress that are advancing real issues that serve the interests of our communities and the people in our neighborhoods. So that's all very, very important. And I had to start by talking about some of the national issues because I think that's how most folks get engaged. But personally, for me, what's most important is the state and local politics. That is what affects your life much more than the national politics. And, it's just, it always pains me. And I always try to take every opportunity I can to encourage folks to look at those candidates who are running for judge. Look at those, those folks. Oftentimes people have very little information about who they're voting on for judge. And those folks, from the state Supreme Court to the state Court of Appeals down to your circuit and district judges, have a huge impact on the lives of people in your communities. I mean, right now, one of the things I'm trying to change is that, here in Michigan and in our very own community, we use our district courts as a revenue source for local governments. And what that basically means is that we're running people through the courts and generating lots of fees and fines and using that to, help balance the budget. And as far as I'm concerned, that's balancing the budget on the backs of poor people. It's taking folks who are already, on the edge of the economy and just, pushing them off that edge and pushing them out of the community. So, those kinds of things, those kinds of decisions, how we administer justice in our community are really determined by these local officials, the judges, the city council people, your mayor, your county commission, your sheriff, your prosecutor. These people are all on the ballot. And one of the great things about local politics versus national politics is that with every one of those folks I just mentioned, you could get them on the phone. You could go to one of their events. They might knock on your door. You can find them in the community. And it's not hard to get a meeting with one of them to talk about something that's important in the community. And that kind of access, I think, is exciting, and I think it's an opportunity that more people should take advantage of. Those races at the local level are super, super critical. And I spent 11 years in the County Board of Commissioners before I ran for state level office. And when I think back about all the opportunities that we took and the opportunities we missed at the county level to improve mental health care for people in our community, what a difference that makes to, when we built the homeless shelter, and what a difference that made for so many folks who are struggling in our community. These very, very pedestrian decisions about where do you put the crosswalk, how many police do we have in our community, what do you do when somebody is caught shoplifting or gets a speeding ticket? How do you handle that? All those little things make a huge difference. But the thing that's probably most exciting to me is the state level politics. And for those of you who vote here in Ann Arbor or here in Washtenaw County, I'm probably your state senator, and I would encourage you to connect with me about these issues if you've got ideas or questions or passions along these lines. But really, when I think about the issues that are most important to me and my future and the future of my family, they're really mostly decisions that are made in Lansing. Things like, are we going to have great schools in every community or not? Are we going to do what the governor wants to do and what Democrats are pushing for and have a weighted school funding formula where the kids who have the greatest need get more support to meet that need? Or are we going to continue to have a model that tries to auction off our education system to Betsy DeVos's friends in the for-profit education system? I mean, that issue is being decided at the state level, not the national level. Are we going to have a good financial aid program here in our state of Michigan? Are we going to make it easier for people to get to U of M or get to Eastern Michigan or get to Wayne State? Or are we going to continue, like we have in Michigan for many years, to lag behind in terms of financial aid? Are we going to have clean air and clean water? Are we going to, everything that happened with the city of Flint and that tragedy was a tragedy caused by, our last governor and our state legislature that said that local government wasn't important and they were willing to get rid of it and put Rick Snyder in charge of those communities. That disaster played out right before my eyes in the Michigan House. And I watched some of my colleagues stand up and say, years before the Flint water crisis happened, there's going to be a problem. When you take away people's local voice, there's no one there to listen. And, so other issues like voting rights, whether or not people can get away with voter intimidation, what kind of access do you have to the polls? Do some people in some communities have to wait in long lines and others can walk right in and vote? Those are all state issues. And finally, criminal justice reform is a huge state issue. This is something that I've been very involved in. This is one of the few issues that's been going relatively well in Lansing. There's a fair amount of bipartisan progress we've had recently. We've made progress in juvenile justice. Just this week, the governor signed a bill called Clean Slate that's going to provide an automatic expungement for hundreds of thousands of people here in the state of Michigan. So there are some interesting things happening on those fronts. Mm-hmm. And if you care about police reform, if you care about ending the war on drugs, those issues are decided in Lansing primarily. And so, that's my kind of broad outline. Obviously, these are issues that are crucial to the future of our community. They're crucial to the future of your lives. And I appreciate you spending the time and attention to listen. And, it's an honor to serve you.
Thank you, Senator Irwin. It's nice to know that we have people who are passionate about the things that go on in our day-to-day lives. I know a lot of emphasis on this election is on the presidential debate, and it's a very important debate for our country and for our nation moving forward. But it's still important that we, as the American citizens, take a look at what's going on in our cities, in our state, like what's going on locally, so that we are informed about what our day-to-day politicians are doing. So a couple questions that I have here for you. You kind of touched on some of them, but why is it that local and state elections don't gain as much attention as national elections?
A couple of ideas. One is that our media landscape in the United States is very, very thin. There's just not a lot of news coverage. Part of that has to do with how journalism has changed in recent years with the internet and some of those, that bumpiness still trying to work itself out. But there just isn't a lot of good local coverage. We don't have local papers anymore. The way people get their information is through Facebook primarily and sites like that. And there's no appetite for local news in the algorithm. Right. And so, I mean, I if you follow my channels on, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and I just started a TikTok page a couple days ago, you'll see that kind of local content. I'm constantly trying to share that stuff. I'm constantly trying to get people that kind of information because it's hard to get. I also think that there's something about our culture that is different than around the world. When you go to other countries, there's much more political engagement. Here in America, there's just sort of a maybe a disdain or a sense that politics isn't the thing to talk about. Whereas, I think it's clearly important. It's clearly something. I want to talk about the important things, not football. Sorry, I like football, but I'm too old for that.
So something that we talked about in today's panel discussion was voting down the ballot. And so in what ways is voting down the ballot more impactful than simply just voting for the president?
I stomped on that ground pretty hard already in the sense that the decisions that are made by the folks who are elected down ballot have, I think, a greater impact on your day-to-day life than decisions made by the people up on the top of the ballot. But the other reason is just like a raw power analysis, right? So a lot of people vote for president. Fewer people vote for U.S. Senate. Fewer people vote for state senator. And the majority of people who vote don't vote for judge. They don't vote for those things. And so, not only are these decisions that those elected officials are making, I would argue, more important, the power that your vote holds within the sort of pool of all the voters is even greater as proportional.
All right. So you talked about the way that the media shapes things, and I think the media does a very good job at covering information about the presidential race and the presidential election. But where can people go to find out more about those local and state races so that we can be informed about what our local government is trying to do in our cities?
Yeah, well, I give you one suggestion. I certainly encourage you to follow what I put out. I would also encourage you to do the same with your other local representatives, right? So for those of you who live on or near U of M campus, your local representative is probably Yusuf Rabi. Follow him, see what he's working on, and what he's going to be posting on his channels are things like, here are the bills I'm introducing, here are the things I care about, here's the speech I made on that issue. But then also, here's some articles that are about an issue that's relevant to what we're discussing in Lansing, or here's something that's really important locally. So for instance, right now, there's a big decision that City Council and the County Board of Commissioners are going to make about a a pollution issue in town. There's a very large pollution plume on the west side of town that's been slowly seeping under the city for many, many years. And, there are big decisions that need to be made about how to address that. And, the articles that detail all of that, are the kinds of things that we like to share. I would also point you towards, some of the media sources in our state that do a decent job of covering state and local news. I think that would be the Detroit Free Press, the Detroit News, MLive. They do a decent job. You should follow them. I would also strongly encourage you to check out something called Bridge Magazine if you haven't checked that out. Bridge Magazine is an online publication. They do longer form stories, so more in depth. The kind of thing that I really like to, I really appreciate their treatment because I like the details. I want to get into the actual nitty gritty, not just the he said, she said. In fact, that's one of the things that really frustrates me about the national media is it's just so much about the horse race and the polls and here's what one side's saying, here's what the other side's saying, here's the commercial. That doesn't do us any good really. What I want is some hardcore analysis. I want the details of exactly what's being proposed by the different sides and why is one better than the other. And that's what gets me going.
Right. So for ladies and gentlemen at home, we would like to open the floor for any questions that you all may have. I'm going to keep asking Senator Irwin some of the things that we'd like to know. But if you have any questions, please place them in the comment box below, and we'll be sure to get to them. So one of the next questions that I have here, what type of things do state legislators and state courts, all things which are on the ballot this year, decide on? What makes them different from national bodies such as Congress and the Supreme Court?
Yeah, absolutely. There'd be a lot of different ways to describe this. One of them is that, the state government is the source that's going to make almost all of your decisions on issues like public education. That goes your K-12, your early childhood education, your higher education, community colleges, universities, all that. That is primarily all decided at the state level, except for there are some national tie-ins. Usually there might be some grants, or Pell Grants, for instance, is a national program. And particularly at the University of Michigan, federal research dollars are a big deal to some of these institutions. But in the main, education is a state issue. There's also some federal education funding. I think it represents about maybe 10 to 15% of the total funding, and but it's majority of the decisions are made at the state level for schools. And I would argue to you that is the most important thing. Period. Education. It's the most important thing that's decided at the state level. The other thing is that when you go into other important issues like the environment, there are national environmental laws, but the way most of the national environmental laws work, like the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act and the National Environmental Protection Act, others, is they'll set a framework, but then the details are really worked out at the state level. And in some other cases, what they'll do is they'll set a floor, and then the states are sort of invited to develop regulations and rules that are more strict than that. And so like an example would be, there are no Great Lakes anywhere else in the country or anywhere else in the world. And the types of rules that we might need to develop for the Great Lakes might be a little different than the types of rules that they need to develop for the Everglades. The types of rules that they might need to develop out in the desert, around water are going to obviously be very different than ours. So the federal framework is there, but the meat on those bones is really put out at the state level. Most of the important decisions about how much can you pollute, and if you're forced to clean it up, how much can you leave behind, and all of that, most of that's decided at the state level. Voting rights, voting issues, access to the polls, all those issues like I talked about earlier about like why is it in some communities you have to wait 4 hours to vote, but in other communities it takes 5 minutes. Those are all state level and local level issues that revolve around resource allocation and also revolve around decisions about how do we define precincts and what's the appropriate size and all those kinds of things. Those are all state level decisions. Criminal justice issues are overwhelmingly state level decisions. The United States is one of the most aggressive nations in terms of incarcerating people. Last I looked, we had the highest per capita incarceration rate in the world, and most of those folks are incarcerated at the state level. There aren't that many federal prisons, and there aren't that many federal prisoners. The vast majority of prisoners are at the state level, and then the vast majority of the criminal justice system, which is much bigger than prisons, is all state and local. It's all state and local. Probation department, folks who are on parole, folks who are in community corrections, drug courts, all that stuff. It's all state level. And even when you look at things like the war on drugs, you look at issues like police reform, police violence, those types of issues. There are federal law enforcement officers, but that is not the majority of what we're talking about here. The majority of what we're talking about is local laws and local jails and local sheriffs and local police. Things like mental health services and human services, anything that deals with services to the poor. The way that usually works is that the money it comes down from the feds, and the decisions about how to spend it are made at the state level, and also at the local level. And oftentimes, what happens is the money will come down from the feds. It'll have certain strings attached to it. The states will will match those dollars, and then those programs will be deployed. But the states have a tremendous amount of flexibility, and the locals have a tremendous amount of flexibility when it comes to how to deploy these resources. Shoot, a caseworker has tremendous flexibility when it comes to how to deploy these resources, right? That very individual who's the caseworker working with that family, there's decisions to be made at that level. And so most of the decisions are really made. The most important decisions are made closest to the ground. I guess that's the overriding message. Really though, when you start talking about stuff like international relations, when you start talking about war abroad and those types of issues, those are all federal issues, obviously, and have very little state involvement, if any. All right. So I guess that'd be my. I'm sure I left some important things out. Infrastructure is kind of a shared deal here in the state of Michigan. About $1 out of every $3 we spend on the roads and bridges comes from the federal government. But then again, we pay a federal gas tax, so those dollars are really just dollars coming back to us.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's really important that we are aware of things that are going on locally within our state. This has been very insightful and very informational for me as well. So I thank you once again for coming to talk to us today and getting us more informed about the things that are going on in the state of Michigan. Our next question is actually from the audience. So we hear a lot about things that may go on from our elected officials that we may not agree with as a people. How can we hold them accountable for their actions?
Yeah, well, that's a big question because there's a lot of different levels to, sort of how you hold people accountable. There's a lot of different brands or flavors of disagreement, right? But I'll try to cover it, and if I don't cover some specific part that folks want to talk about, please follow up. I say the first thing is that you got to let your elected officials who are in there know what you want. And I think there's a couple different sides to that. One is, you're putting people on notice. You're saying, please vote for this bill or please don't vote for that bill. That's all good. And you should take the opportunity to let your elected officials know, what you want. But there's a particular opportunity to have those conversations in the couple weeks and few months leading up to an election. And I think that's a particularly important time to be asking those kinds of questions. So, obviously elections are a great tool for accountability, but even outside of elections, you can write your elected officials, you can call them up. I hold monthly coffee hours at this point. I used to do it twice a month. We now are doing them virtually. You can come to those kinds of events for your elected officials and ask questions. A question can be very powerful. I remember one time I was here in Ypsilanti actually, and I was at an event. It was a Human Rights Commission meeting. And we were talking about police training, and a woman got up in the audience and she asked a question. She said, I have a question. Is it possible for the officers to fail the cultural competency training? And that question, I've been thinking about that question for 6 years, right? Oh my gosh, yeah, that's a really good question. Can they fail it? No, not the way they do it. And so is it working, right? Or doesn't that question sort of beg an answer. So anyway, a question can be very, very powerful. You can do it in those kinds of settings, in coffee hours. You can do it in writing. You can ask your representative to spend some time with you and just talk to them. I mean, I literally meet with people all the time where it's just a resident who has an idea that they want to share with me or has a perspective that they want to share with me. And I tell people all the time, and I'll tell you, please tell me what you know. I don't know what you know. But if you tell me, then maybe I will, and that will be helpful to me in my job. And so I tell people all the time, please contact me. Tell me what you want. You're helping me do my job. And so many elected officials have that attitude and make it very, very easy to work with them. And others maybe aren't as accessible. And it may be a little bit hard to hold them accountable. I think when you get in a situation like that, where it's someone who is difficult to hold accountable or someone who maybe you disagree with vehemently, that's when you have to do what I used to say when I was working in environmental activism. You have to sort of move along in the cycle of accountability. You need to kind of like ratchet up the heat step by step, right? And I don't think you go right from a question to protest, but you try to move up that chain. And what you're constantly trying to do is you're constantly trying to persuade the person to see things the way you see them, or to sort of raise the point of pain for doing the wrong thing to the point where it's higher than doing the right thing. Because a lot of times, people, it's hard. They think it's bad for them to do the right thing, and so you got to sometimes make it obvious to them that it's going to be bad for them to do the wrong thing. And sometimes that means putting them on blast publicly, or other things, right? Sometimes it's all sorts of things, but there's a whole lot between here and there. Sometimes you got to think about, how do I get to this person? What is it that this person cares about that I can use as a window into their mind or into their way of thinking, right? Is it maybe some way to access them through their faith community or through their philosophy or through a mutual friend or through a donor or we could spend a whole day talking about this, right? How do you talk to elected officials? How do you get the best out of them? And in what way? But that's kind of a quick answer, kind of.
Yeah. I think it's really important that we the people are able to hold our elected officials accountable, because they're there to serve us, and if we are not being served in the best ways possible, I think we deserve that right to be able to come and talk to them and tell them the things that we need, the things that we would like to see in our own communities. So thank you for that insight. We have one final question from. Oh, for sure.
Let me just jump real quick. There's one more thing you can do, because you just kind of reminded me, right? Because I was an activist for a long time, before I ran for office. You can also run for office, right? So I would encourage everybody to think about that, right? There's a lot of different ways to affect your community positively. Public service is definitely one of them. So consider just running. Thanks.
That kind of leads into this next question. So for those who are interested in making change in the communities, how easy/difficult is it to get involved within local politics?
That's another reason why I think sometimes state and local politics are so much more exciting, because if you're doing the state and local politics, it bubbles up and has a positive effect on the national politics anyway. And the great thing about the state and local politics is it's a lot more easy to get in there and do it and be an active part of the effort than it is at the national level, right? A lot of times when you work on these national campaigns, it can feel like you're swimming in this giant pool, and it's hard to see maybe the relevance of your efforts and things like that. The great thing about doing local work is that it's a lot easier to see the fruits of your labor, and it's a lot easier to understand how, if what you're doing is working or not, and to keep doing it, or if what you're doing is not working, maybe change tactics, all that kind of stuff. It's the way to go. And for me, I got active and involved as a young person. I ended up running for county commission when I was still an undergraduate at U of M. So in my 4th year at U of M, I had been doing some activism. I had been working on, some environmental issues, but I'd also been working with a group of people who were trying to build a new homeless shelter. I mentioned that earlier. This is before the Delana Center existed here in Ann Arbor. And, we were butting our heads up against the local governments, trying to figure out how do we get this homeless shelter bill, and a seat opened up on the county board. And I thought, well, here's a great way for me to advance this interest, right? And so I ran. And so, I would just encourage everybody, if you're interested in getting involved in your community, interested in trying to make the community a better place, just get involved. Just pick up a shovel, just volunteer for an organization, get involved in the Washington County Democratic Party, get involved in College Dems, get involved in whatever you like. Do it through your fraternity. Do it, whether that's actually getting politically active and like just like literally volunteering for a campaign or going out and doing something like I was just talking about, like knocking doors, or whether it's doing something that's maybe a little more lasting, like getting involved in some community-based organization to volunteer and support them. That is an amazing way to get politically involved, because you realize that kind of community-based work is necessarily political, and you end up meeting a lot of the players locally, and you start understanding maybe how to pitch in and help in the best way. So I would just encourage people to get involved in organizations. If there's a listserv that's talking about something you think is interesting, get involved in it, right? And just get out there and do it.
Thank you, Senator Irwin. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your insight. It's good to hear from someone who's for the people, someone who's actively trying to make change within our local government. So thank you all for tuning in. For those of you who tuned in yesterday, thank you for coming back. This is an ongoing thing, ladies and gentlemen. So this concludes the end of our mini week, but please stay tuned to our Instagram and Twitter pages for more of our voting efforts. We'll be going all the way up until the election, so stay tuned for ways that you can help and ways you can help us get involved with the election coming up. Also, we are still running our We Vote t-shirt campaign, so feel free to fill out the form and grab a shirt so you can look good on your way to the polls. Right now, we are going to take a picture with you and our president from NAACP, so if brothers could come forward. That will be the end of our program. Senator Irwin, if you could stay on really quickly for a picture. But, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining, and good night.